Hey guys, so I'm going to talk about something that I actually have been wanting to talk about for years and I've just never had anywhere to put it. It's something anyone who's probably been in a debate club or even taken like an English class knows about, that being the naturalistic fallacy, but it's not something that a lot of people actually implement, and it creates a lot of harmful industries, both in an environmental sense and just in a social and even economic sense. I actually wrote a college essay about this in my freshman year, so I know way too much about this shit. It was like 5 pages long. I'm not gonna subject you guys to that, but let's just get into it. So, for anyone who may not know, the naturalistic fallacy is a logical fallacy where you essentially assume that something is good just because it's natural. This, with even a small amount of thought, is quite obviously not the case. I mean, animals murder each other in the wild. That's natural, but that doesn't mean we should murder people. Deadly nightshade is natural. That does not mean we should eat it. I think everyone can generally agree with this. But the naturalistic fallacy comes into play heavily when it comes to GMOs in the organic food industry. I know this seems way out there for my channel, but it's just something that has been eating at me recently, no pun intended. And I just really need to get it out. The main argument against GMOs is generally that they're not natural and a misunderstanding of how they're created. There's different kinds of GMOs that are created in different ways, but you could argue that really everything we eat and even our pets, like domestic animals, are GMOs because GMO literally just means genetically modified organism. Selective breeding makes something a GMO. So there's really no non GMO food, but generally, when people talk about GMOs, they mean having the DNA modified to create some what they don't perceive as positive, but some positive effect in the food, such as being resistant to certain pests or weeds, having a longer shelf life, being bigger or looking a certain way, having higher nutrition, many things. In very simplistic terms, to create a GMO that is not just selective breeding, certain genomes are isolated that have the desired trait and either amplified, or if they come from another organism and cloned and inserted into the organism or plant cells of what they're trying to grow. So let's say one crop is resistant to a certain weed, and you want your tomato plant to not have to use pesticides to have those weeds because it's cheaper and it's also better for the environment and the people eating it. They could isolate the genome that makes that other plant resistant to the weeds and essentially, again, very simplistic terms, copy paste it into the other organism. A lot of people think this is done with radiation. It's not. It's done in bacterial cultures. It's not done in it's not like you're just putting radiation on it and hoping it mutates in the way you want. It is very specifically selecting certain genes and choosing which ones go where. There are no studies showing that GMOs have negative health effects. I searched far and wide. They may exist somewhere, but they are not prominent or widely accepted. Certain GMOs also have benefits that are often overlooked in favor of the naturalistic fallacy. Things like using less water because they're more resistant to drought, reduce deforestation because they can be grown closer together, less use of pesticides and herbicides because they create their own, as well as things like golden rice, which aren't created for the process of growing them, but are very, very nutrient rich and have even been used to help prevent malnutrition based blindness in third world countries. I don't think everyone who's on the whole organic food trend is even aware of these things, so I'm not necessarily saying they are intentionally disregarding that information. It's not something that's super well known unless you're interested in this. Um, but I have spoken to people, both in my personal life and online, who do not care because they think it's unnatural and they think that they don't believe it and they believe, oh, big pesticide companies, blah, 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 Monsanto, whatever. And those things are bad and all. But the organic food industry is just as bad. Organic foods create more deforestation. They require more space to grow in general. They often require higher maintenance and more pesticides because they do not create their own. And that's a whole issue with people freaking out about pesticides already being in their food. But the thing is, a lot of those natural pesticides that the plants create come from other foods that you eat, that are then inserted into that other plant so that it can as well create its own natural pesticide. GMOs can also help prevent food waste because a lot of them have longer shelf lives. You're not throwing something out 3 days after it's on the shelf. As well as the issue with organic foods being insurmountably more expensive on what's essentially a scam, benefiting off of people who fall victim of the naturalistic fallacy. Just looking at the website of the grocery store nearest to me, 3 Honeycrisp apples that are not non-GMO or organic are $1.24. The same amount of Honeycrisp apples that are organic and non-GMO are $2.84. It's almost double, if not more. I'm bad at math. It's at least double the price for the same amount of food. And mind you, food that is probably grown in a less environmentally friendly way. These companies are essentially scamming people and benefiting off of their lack of knowledge of the whole naturalistic fallacy thing. And not to mention people who are obsessed with organic and healthy food and whatever, shaming people who don't eat organic things or refusing to eat at people's houses when they don't have organic things or whatever, whenever a lot of people, including myself, just can't afford it even if they wanted it, because it is a for-profit thing. And don't get me wrong, I mean, obviously GMOs are also just as much a victim of capitalism, but it's taking advantage of people's lack of knowledge to extort them for money for the same product that is both less helpful to the environment and has no direct benefits. Now, there are issues with GMOs. 2 particular ones that stand out to me is that if the crops or the seeds of those crops get blown in the wind or picked up by an animal or something, they can overrun other things because they're, like I said, more resistant to drought, can be grown closer together and resistant to certain weeds, so they're harder to get rid of, which is definitely an issue, but it can be overcome with caution. As well as another issue, not being environmental, but just being capitalism can suck my dick, which is that a lot of these plants are copyrighted, that people have rights over them, and they are sold to farmers at higher prices, and they can't just use their own seeds from the plant. They have to buy more. So it does create an issue for farmers who don't want to grow organic crops or just can't grow organic crops and then have to pay a corporation at ridiculous rates to be able to grow more efficient crops. But personally, I think those are much more solvable and more worth solving than anything to do with organic foods. They are issues and they need to be addressed, but I would rather have a shitty capitalist plant that hurts the environment less than a plant that's just as much a shitty capitalist plant hiding under the guise of the naturalistic fallacy and hurting the environment. There's also just the general culture that this whole organic food, non-GMO, whatever, culture creates. People if you know who Baby Fern on TikTok is, whose mother is a crunchy mom and whatever, and is raw vegan, you can't eat anything with GMOs, shoes are unnatural, she is the human embodiment of the naturalistic fallacy. I urge you to go look her up if you can tolerate not having a heart attack looking at her, because even crazy anti-GMO people still think she's nuts. But it does create a lot of people like that who just fall headfirst into this, if it's not natural, it's bad. And I mean, the naturalistic fallacy is not just exclusive to foods and things you consume. I mean, it's a major argument for homophobia, being that being gay is unnatural, which isn't even true, but is a flawed argument because it's based off a fallacy. But just using this argument and perpetuating it just creates a whole slew of issues, and those issues somehow end up connecting to damaging the environment more. Long story short, enjoy your GMO apples. Don't waste your money with companies who just want to extort you for a food craze and base all of their marketing off of a logical fallacy. Organic food companies can get fucked, honestly. Sorry for the shorter and off-topic video. Thanks for watching, guys.
I stare at the populace in